Y'all. Y'all. Pull up. Pull up right now and lock in, because Megan Thee Stallion just lit the match on a relationship the entire culture had been side-eyeing for months, and the smoke is everywhere. She didn't tweet a riddle. She didn't drop a cryptic lyric. She walked straight to the timeline, opened the door wide, and let the whole world watch a four-time NBA champion get folded in front of his own family album. And the wildest part? The wildest, most uncomfortable, most stop-scrolling part. Nobody saw the actual receipt that flipped this whole thing. Everybody is screaming about cheating. Everybody is screaming about monogamy. Everybody is screaming about who was right and who was wrong. But there is one tiny detail buried under the noise that explains the entire collapse, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So sit down. Get comfortable. Lock the door. Because tonight we are not telling you what happened. We are showing you why it had to happen. And by the time we land this plane, you will understand why this story is going to be quoted at brunches, in barbershops, in classrooms, in therapy rooms, and in court documents for years to come. This isn't a breakup story. This is a power transfer caught on camera. Let's rewind for a second, because the timeline matters. The timeline is the whole game. Megan Thee Stallion, the Houston hot girl who turned grief into platinum plaques, who turned heartbreak into stadium tours, who turned every single setback into a sold-out summer, was supposedly entering her soft era. Her lover girl chapter. The one where the trauma stops paying rent in her chest and the man finally shows up with the receipts of consistency. Klay Thompson, a future Hall of Famer, 4 rings deep, $300 million in career earnings, was supposed to be the answer. He wasn't loud. He wasn't messy. He wasn't the type of athlete who lives on Instagram live with a bottle in his hand. He was the quiet superstar. The boring one. The safe one. The one your auntie nods at and says, now that one might be different. And for a moment, it really did look different. Family dinners. Thanksgiving plates. Mama hugs. Sideline kisses. The whole picture. The whole package. The whole, this might actually be it, energy. The kind of energy that makes you want to fold the napkin gently and put down the phone for a minute and just believe in something again. Until it wasn't. Because here is what the public missed. While everybody was busy posting heart eye emojis under those courtside photos, while everybody was busy crowning them the next great power couple, the foundation underneath them was already cracked. And the crack didn't start with another woman. The crack didn't start with a sneaky link. The crack started with a question nobody wanted to ask out loud: what happens when a man who has already won everything meets a woman who is still climbing? What happens when his ambition is exhausted and hers is still on fire? What happens when one person is trying to lock the door and the other is trying to kick it open? That is the story. That is the real story. And every single thing you saw on the timeline this week was just the surface bubbling. The kettle had been screaming for a long time. We were just too busy watching the steam to listen for the whistle. Now let me read you what she actually posted. Because if you only saw screenshots, you missed the shape of it. You missed the rhythm. You missed the way the words landed like a closing argument in a courtroom. She said he had been leading her on. She said he brought her around his entire family playing house. She said she held him down through the mood swings, through the basketball season, through the bad nights, through the silent treatments. And then, after all of that, after the loyalty, after the public cosigns, after the family integrations, he came back to her and said, and I quote the energy of it, I don't know if I can be monogamous. Read that sentence again. Slowly. Because that sentence is not a confession. That sentence is an exit strategy dressed up like vulnerability. That sentence is a man with 4 rings telling a woman with 5 Grammys that the version of love she signed up for is suddenly, conveniently, no longer on the menu. And here is the cherry on top of that bitter sundae: he did not say it on day 1. He did not say it on day 30. He said it after she had already given him the most expensive parts of her time. And the timing is the part that nobody is talking about loud enough. You don't tell a woman you can't be monogamous in the beginning. You tell her at the end. You tell her after you have already mentally checked out. You tell her after you have already calculated what the exit costs versus what the loyalty costs. You tell her after you have already done the math on her brand, her bank, her body, her bandwidth, and decided that the price of staying is higher than the price of leaving. That sentence wasn't an invitation to renegotiate. That sentence was a receipt being slid across the table. A polite version of, "I'm done, but I want you to be the one who walks." And Megan, to her credit, picked up the pen and signed it for him in front of 70 million people. She did not flinch. She did not negotiate. She did not beg. She closed the book, walked out of the building, and turned the lights off behind her like a woman who had already rehearsed this scene in private 100 times. Now everybody wants to play armchair therapist. Everybody wants to act like this came out of nowhere. It did not come out of nowhere. It came out of months of microtells. It came out of body language. It came out of unfollowed accounts and refollowed accounts. It came out of half-answered questions in press tunnels. Remember that interview? The one where the reporter asked him, point blank, what his biggest dream was, and he said, finding inner peace and being content. That answer right there was the warning shot. A man who is happy in his relationship doesn't talk about peace like he's trying to escape a war zone. A man who is content in his relationship doesn't dodge the question about how his partner has made him better. He smiles. He brags. He shouts her name into the microphone. He doesn't clear his throat, look down, and say, I'm not gonna talk about that. That wasn't humility. That was distance. That was a man who had already started building the door before anyone noticed he was carrying lumber. And we, the audience, mistook the silence for class. It wasn't class. It was packing. And once you see it, you can't stop seeing it everywhere. Because here is the part that turns this from gossip into geometry. The shape of this entire situation is older than both of them. It is the same shape that has been swallowing high-status couples for decades. Athlete plus entertainer. Defender plus performer. Quiet money plus loud spotlight. It almost never ends in a wedding. It almost always ends in a statement. And the reason is not because the love isn't real. The love is often very real. The reason is because the gravity of two suns trying to orbit each other is impossible to maintain. One of them has to dim. One of them has to bend. And in this particular orbit, neither one of them was built to dim. Megan is not a dimmer. Megan is a floodlight. Megan is the woman who turned a near-fatal injury into a Beyoncé feature and a Roc Nation cosign. You don't ask a woman like that to shrink. You don't ask a woman like that to play house in the suburbs while your career taps out. You ask a woman like that to keep flying, and you decide if you can keep up with the altitude. And if your knees can't take the altitude, you don't blame the sky. You buy a smaller plane and you wave at her from the runway. He could not keep up with the altitude. So he reached for the parachute. But let's be honest about the parachute, because this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. There is a school of thought, loud on every barbershop podcast and every red pill Twitter thread, that says Klay was right to leave. That he saw a financial liability. That he saw a woman who wanted private jets, yachts, designer everything, and decided his $300 million had to last him the rest of his life. That logic sounds clean on paper. It sounds responsible. It sounds like a man finally putting his money over his momentum. But that logic only works if you completely ignore what kind of woman Megan Thee Stallion actually is. This is not a woman waiting on a man's wallet. This is a woman with her own touring revenue, her own publishing, her own brand deals, her own whiskey line, her own animation deal, her own everything. Megan does not need anybody's $300 million. Megan generates her own $300 million in slow motion. So when commentators try to frame her as a gold-digging risk, What they are really doing is recycling a very old script that has nothing to do with Megan and everything to do with their own discomfort watching a black woman build a tower next to a black man's tower without asking him for a brick. They cannot stand the parody. So they invent the dependency. It is the oldest trick in the misogyny playbook, and it is exhausting in the year we are currently living in. That's the real story. And nobody on the panel shows is going to say it out loud. Now let's zoom in on Klay for a second, because to understand the breakup you have to understand the man. He is 36 years old. His knees have already been rebuilt twice. His shooting splits aren't what they used to be. He is in the chapter every great athlete eventually arrives at, the chapter where the body starts whispering, soon, and the bank account starts whispering, forever. When you are at that intersection, your brain rewires itself. Suddenly you are not thinking about the next ring. You are thinking about the next 40 years. Suddenly you are not thinking about the headline. You are thinking about the inheritance. Suddenly the woman next to you is no longer a teammate, she is a line item. And once a man starts looking at his partner like a line item, the relationship is already in hospice. He just hasn't called the family in yet. The flowers are already wilting on the nightstand. The breath is already getting shallow. The doctor in his head has already filled out the paperwork. He is just waiting for an excuse to sign it. That is what happened here. Quietly. Slowly. Without fireworks. Until the fireworks came. And then there is the optics layer. The part everybody pretends doesn't matter but secretly runs the entire show. Klay Thompson is a man who has spent his entire public life being known for being unbothered. The fishing boat. The dad shorts. The blank stare. The he's just a vibe energy. That brand, that quiet superstar brand, is worth more to him than any romantic relationship will ever be. The second the gossip cycle started attaching the words messy and moody and drama to his name, his entire personal mythology was under threat. And when a man's mythology is under threat, he doesn't fight to save the relationship. He fights to save the myth. He retreats. He goes silent. He lets his family talk. He lets his publicist talk. He lets every podcast in the country talk for him while he conveniently sits in front of an empty microphone and says he is not going to talk about that. That is not a coincidence. That is a strategy. That is reputation laundering in real time. And every man who has ever ducked accountability behind a no comment learned the same trick from the same mirror. Meanwhile, Megan is over here doing the opposite. Megan is doing the loud thing. Megan is doing the messy thing. Megan is doing the thing that the internet immediately punishes women for doing. She is telling the truth out loud. And for that crime, the comment sections turned on her in seconds. Suddenly she was the problem. Suddenly she was unstable. Suddenly she was too much. Suddenly there were entire thread armies asking why she told his business. Let me tell you exactly why. Because his business was her body. His business was her time. His business was her trust. His business was her future. And when a man cashes all of that in and tries to walk away with the wallet still warm, the woman has every single right to print the receipt. Print it loud. Print it long. Print it in 14-point bold. Stop telling women to be discreet about their crucifixion just because the nails were brand name. Stop telling women to handle it privately when the harm was paraded publicly. The post is not the problem. The pattern is the problem. That right there is the cultural crack this whole story exposed. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, but she's famous too, she should have known better. You are thinking, she's a hot girl, she signed up for this. You are thinking, he never promised her forever. Let me stop you right there, because that is exactly the kind of slick reasoning that lets predators in suits sleep at night. Nobody, no matter how famous, no matter how rich, no matter how brand tested, signs up to be played in front of their own grandmother. Nobody signs up to cook Thanksgiving dinner with a man's mother and then watch him quietly downgrade her to a chapter 3 months later. Nobody signs up to be introduced as the future and then quietly demoted to the past tense in a press release nobody read out loud. Fame does not come with a clause that strips you of the right to be hurt. Money does not come with a clause that strips you of the right to be honest. And being a hot girl on stage does not strip you of the right to be a soft girl at home. The same woman who hits the splits on stage gets to cry in the kitchen. The same woman who twerks for 40,000 people gets to need silence for 40 minutes. Stop confusing performance with permission. So when Megan posted what she posted, she wasn't being dramatic. She was being precise. Let me show you the receipt nobody is connecting. The one that snaps the whole picture into focus. The one that turns this from a he said she said into a documented case. Roughly 7 years ago, before any of you knew Klay was anywhere near a microphone with Megan's name on it, there was already paperwork. Already a story. Already a pattern. An ex-girlfriend, long before this current chapter, allegedly turned over what people online have been calling a journal, a notebook, a confession in his own handwriting, where he reportedly reflected on his own behavior with women across his time in the league. The pages, real or alleged, painted a man who was deeply self-aware about his own inconsistencies and yet completely unwilling to fix them. That story didn't trend back then because Klay wasn't a tabloid name. He was a basketball name. The world wasn't paying attention. But the pattern was there. The pattern has always been there. And the moment Megan tapped post, that old story did not stay buried. It came back up to the surface like oil from a cracked pipeline. And suddenly every panelist defending him in 2026 looked deeply, deeply uninformed. Because once a pattern is documented in your own handwriting, denial becomes an exhausting full-time job. That is the detail. That is the buried receipt. That is the thread that ties the whole story together. Because once you accept that this wasn't his first cycle, you have to accept the whole truth about cycles. Cycles do not break themselves. Cycles do not graduate themselves. Cycles do not retire on their own. A man does not magically become monogamous because he met the right woman. A man becomes monogamous because he does the work, sits in the discomfort, kills the version of himself that needed 5 women to feel like one man, and rebuilds. Klay did not do that work. Why would he? Nobody ever asked him to. The league didn't ask him to. The fans didn't ask him to. The trophies didn't ask him to. Megan was the first one who said out loud, "If you want to keep me, you have to be only mine," and his honest answer, the answer he probably could not even say to the mirror, was, "I don't know if I can." That is not villainy. That is honesty arriving 12 months too late. And honesty that arrives that late is not a gift. It is an invoice for the years you wasted believing the lie. But honesty late is still cruelty. Because by the time he said it, she had already integrated. She had already met the family. She had already moved her heart into rooms she did not own the lease on. She had already let her guard down in front of his people. She had already let her brand bend itself around the shape of his schedule. And when you ask a woman to bend that much and then you tell her you can't even commit, you are not breaking up with her. You are billing her for the renovation and keeping the house. That is the part that should make every single one of you uncomfortable. That is the part that should make every man watching this recheck his own ledger. Because the rent on a black woman's loyalty is not paid in promises. It is paid in protection. And if you cannot protect her from the very next woman who slides into your DMs, you do not deserve the keys. You do not deserve the dinner plate. You do not deserve the holiday card. You do not deserve the playlist she made on a Tuesday night when she was crying in the bathtub trying to convince herself you were worth it. Now let's talk about the part everybody is whispering about but nobody wants to say out loud on camera. The intervention. The family arc. The PR pivot. Because somewhere in the middle of all this, there is reporting, there is chatter, there is a mountain of receipts suggesting that voices around Klay started moving pieces on the chessboard. Phone calls were made. Sports panels were strategically populated. Old friendly faces with national platforms started softening his image and pivoting the conversation, slowly, gently, almost surgically, toward the idea that maybe Meghan was the unstable one. Maybe Meghan was the difficult one. Maybe Meghan was the one who could not be trusted. That pivot did not happen by accident. That pivot was a campaign. And the moment that campaign started, this stopped being a relationship issue and started being a public relations war. Meghan was no longer fighting an ex. She was fighting an entire machine that had 4 championship rings worth of credibility behind it. A machine that owns suits, owns segments, owns sponsorships, owns the very microphones the conversation is being held into. And she was holding a phone. Just a phone. And a notes app paragraph. And the truth. And she still won the day on the timeline. That part right there should tell you everything about whose truth was heavier. Because the timeline does not lie about weight. The timeline knows. The timeline always knows. Within hours of her post, the comments split the culture down the middle. Half the world rallied behind her. The other half tried to make her the villain. But the receipts kept rising. The clips kept resurfacing. The old patterns kept matching. And the more the campaign tried to reframe her, the louder her original sentence echoed back. I held him down through his horrible mood swings. That sentence will follow him into every interview for the next decade. That sentence will be in every roast. That sentence will be in every documentary. That sentence is now part of his legacy whether he likes it or not. He has 4 rings. He has 300 million. He has a Hall of Fame jacket coming. And he also has that sentence. They are riding shotgun in his obituary now. Forever. The trophies will tarnish. The contracts will expire. The highlights will get re-edited and uploaded by some teenager who wasn't even born during his rookie year. But that one quiet, deadly sentence she dropped on a Tuesday will still be there, sitting under his name, every time anybody types it into a search bar. Now I want you to zoom out. All the way out. Because this story is not just about 2 famous people. This story is a mirror. This story is happening in your group chat. This story is happening in your cousin's apartment. This story is happening to the woman you work next to who keeps showing up with red eyes and a forced smile. The shape of this betrayal is not exotic. The shape of this betrayal is everywhere. A woman invests. A man integrates her. A man uses her presence to soften his image, to humanize his brand, to fill out the photo album his mother always wanted. And then, the second she expects the contract to match the campaign, the contract evaporates. I don't know if I can be monogamous. Translation: I enjoyed the version of you that asked for nothing. I cannot afford the version of you that asks for everything. Goodbye, beautiful. Try not to make a sound on the way out. And the woman, every single time, is told to handle it gracefully. Don't post. Don't tell. Don't spoil his image. Don't ruin the season. Don't disturb the brand. Just disappear quietly, please, and let him sleep at night. Meghan made a sound. A loud one. And good. Because the silence is what kills women like her. The silence is what convinces the next girl she is the problem. The silence is what lets the cycle keep running for another 7 years until another notebook surfaces and another timeline catches fire. So if you are watching this right now and you have ever been told to keep it private while your dignity was being publicly carved, let me say this clearly. Your story is not gossip. Your story is evidence. Your voice is not drama. Your voice is documentation. And the next woman behind you, the one who is about to walk into the same trap with the same man wearing a different cologne, is depending on you to print the receipt. She does not know your name yet. She does not know your face yet. But she is about to inherit your silence, and silence has interest. Silence compounds. Silence builds entire generations of women who think the bad behavior they are tolerating is normal, because the women before them were too tired, too embarrassed, or too threatened to speak. Print it loud. Print it long. Print it permanent. Now the question I keep getting in my DMs is, what does Megan do next? And the answer, if you have been paying attention to her career arc, is already obvious. She does what she has always done. She turns the wound into a workout. She turns the heartbreak into a hook. She turns the betrayal into a bar. And somewhere inside a studio, on a night nobody is watching, she is going to put on a beat that sounds like a slow-rolling thunderstorm and deliver 3 minutes of vocabulary that will redefine this entire chapter of her life. The man will be on a fishing boat somewhere pretending he doesn't hear it. His friends will hear it. His exes will hear it. The barbershop will hear it. The plane he is flying private on will hear it. There is no escape from a Megan diss because Megan does not whisper. Megan engineers. Megan archives. Megan turns betrayal into a building she owns the deed to. And when she is done with this chapter, the whole arc of her career is going to look like a woman who kept getting hit by hurricanes and kept rebuilding her house bigger every single time. That is not a victim. That is a contractor. That is somebody who took every single brick the world threw at her and used it to add another floor. And while she is building, he is going to be doing what men in his position always do. Quiet trips. Quiet women. Quiet damage control. The occasional sympathetic article placed in the right outlet. The occasional resurfaced highlight reel to remind the public of his actual job. He will get the soft re-entry. He will get the redemption arc. He will get the hard time in his personal life sentence stitched into his upcoming Hall of Fame package. The system always lets the rings do the talking. But the sentence she dropped, the sentence about the mood swings, the sentence about the cold feet, the sentence about playing house, that sentence is going to keep tapping him on the shoulder for the rest of his life. Because the internet does not forget. The internet just waits. The internet has a long memory and an even longer screenshot folder. And every time he tries to walk into a new chapter, somebody in the comments under his next post is going to ask him about the Notes app paragraph that ended his last one. Let me leave you with the part that stings the most. The part that should make every single one of you, men and women, sit with yourselves for a long time tonight. The biggest lie this entire situation exposes is the lie that money fixes character. It does not. It magnifies it. A small man with a small bank account is small. A small man with a $300 million bank account is just a small man with reach. The contracts get bigger. The toys get shinier. The fishing boats get longer. But the mirror is the same mirror it was when he was 14. And the work is the same work it was when he was 14. If he was avoidant then, he is avoidant now. If he was emotionally unavailable then, he is emotionally unavailable now. If he could not commit then, he absolutely cannot commit through 4 rings, 300 million, 2 surgeries, and the gravitational pull of a woman like Megan Thee Stallion. You don't outgrow your patterns by accident. You only outgrow them on purpose. He never chose purpose. So purpose left him. And it left him in front of 70 million people on a Tuesday afternoon. Quietly. Surgically. Unforgettably. So here is the unique angle nobody on the gossip circuit is brave enough to land on. This was not a breakup. This was an audit. Megan did not expose Klay. Megan opened the books. She showed the entire culture what high-status courtship actually costs when one party is unwilling to pay. She showed the entire culture what a 4-time champion looks like when you remove the basketball backdrop and replace it with an emotional one. She showed the entire culture that brand power is not love. That ring count is not loyalty. That a man who can close out a Game 6 cannot necessarily close out a relationship. And she did all of that with a single post. No press tour. No interview circuit. No staged tears. Just a quiet, surgical, perfectly punctuated paragraph that detonated from coast to coast. It was the kind of post that scholars will eventually study. The kind of post that will be screenshot in a TED Talk one day. The kind of post that ends a man's relationship arc and starts a national conversation in the same breath. That is not gossip. That is precision. And here is something else nobody is saying out loud. There is a generation of young women watching this whole thing in real time, scrolling on their lunch breaks, watching on the bus, listening on the way to class. And every single one of them is taking notes whether they know it or not. They are watching to see if Megan gets dragged for telling the truth. They are watching to see if the world rewards her honesty or punishes it. Because the second she pays a price for speaking, every single one of them will quietly decide that their own truths are too expensive to share. And the next time a quiet superstar with 4 rings and a soft public image starts moving wrong, they will sit on it. They will swallow it. They will turn it into a knot in their chest and carry it for the rest of their 20s. So this story, this whole situation, is bigger than 2 adults breaking up. This story is a referendum on whether truth-telling is still affordable for women in 2026. And every comment, every retweet, every cosign, every "she went too far" tweet, is a vote being cast on what the next generation of women will be allowed to say out loud. So choose carefully where you stand. Because the women coming behind you are reading the room. And let me name something else that is not getting enough airtime in this conversation, because it is going to come up in every relationship debate for the next 6 months whether we plan for it or not. There is a generation of men out there right now who genuinely believe that being non-committal is a personality trait. They wear it like cologne. They build their whole brand around it. They call it options. They call it freedom. They call it keeping it real. Let me translate that for you in plain English. It is fear. It is the fear of being chosen back. It is the fear of being held to the same standard they hold the women they date. It is the fear of waking up one day and realizing that the only thing standing between them and a real, adult, accountable life is their own willingness to grow up. And rather than face that fear, they outsource it onto every woman foolish enough to believe she can love it out of them. You cannot love a man into commitment. You can only date the man who is already committed. That is the lesson buried under this whole timeline, and if you walk with one single takeaway tonight, let it be that one. Date the man who has already done the work. Not the man who promises a tomorrow. I want to slow down for a second and walk you through what I think actually happened in that final conversation between them, the one nobody got to hear, the one that lives behind closed doors. Because I have lived enough years and watched enough relationships die in slow motion to know exactly what that night sounded like. It sounded like long pauses. It sounded like a man staring at his phone instead of staring at her face. It sounded like a woman asking a question 3 different ways and getting the same flavorless non-answer every single time. It sounded like the moment when she finally stopped asking, because she realized he had already left the room emotionally weeks ago and his body was just visiting. And in that silence, the real heartbreak does not look like crying. The real heartbreak looks like a woman quietly walking to the bathroom, washing her face, looking herself in the mirror, and whispering, "I am too tired to keep auditioning for somebody who already hired somebody else." That is the moment Megan stepped into. That is the moment that made the post inevitable. The post wasn't impulsive. The post was the receipt of a decision she had already made in private weeks earlier. And there is one more layer I need you to sit with. Because every time a story like this drops, the same chorus shows up in the comments saying, "Why are you giving them this much attention? Why does this matter? They are just 2 rich people having a fight." Let me tell you why it matters. It matters because culture is downstream of celebrity. It matters because the way we talk about Megan in 2026 will shape the way some teenage girl in Kansas talks about herself in 2030. It matters because the rules we let men like Klay walk away with become the rules every other man in the country quietly inherits. It matters because if a 4-time champion can hand a woman that sentence and skate off into the soft Hall of Fame sunset, every average dude with average problems is going to feel licensed to do the same thing on a smaller scale. Famous breakups are not just gossip. They are case studies. They are precedents. They write the unwritten rules of how we treat each other for the next 10 years. So no, this is not too much attention. This is exactly the right amount of attention. And the people telling you to look away are usually the ones with something to hide. So the next time somebody slides into your timeline and tries to tell you Megan was too much, tell them she was exactly enough. The next time somebody tries to sell you the story that Klay was protecting his money, ask them what he was protecting his soul from. The next time somebody tries to flatten this into another celebrity breakup, remind them that this is a mirror, and the people most upset about what they see in the mirror are the ones who recognize themselves the most. Tell them to take a long look at their own ledger before they start critiquing somebody else's audit. Tell them that the women they love, the women they raised, the women they go home to at night, are watching how they react to this story. And tell them that loyalty to a man who cannot commit is not a virtue. It is just a habit. A bad one. One that should have died a long time ago. Because somewhere out there is a man who saw himself in Klay this week. And somewhere out there is a woman who saw herself in Megan this week. And the only difference between the famous version of this story and your version is the size of the audience. The pain is the same. The pattern is the same. The exit line is the same. I don't know if I can be monogamous. That sentence is being whispered in apartments, in cars, in late-night text threads, in airports, in hotel rooms, in dorms, in marriages, right now, as you watch this. That sentence is the most quiet, most polite, most cowardly form of abandonment in the entire dictionary. And the answer to that sentence, the only answer, is the one Megan gave. Hand the receipts to the room. Walk out the door. Take your name with you. Take your peace with you. Take your future with you. And let the man find out, in real time, what the silence sounds like when the woman who used to fill the room finally leaves it. Let him sit in that silence for a year. Let him learn what his life sounds like without her laugh in it. Let him discover, slowly and painfully, that the woman he could not commit to was the only ceiling holding his sky up. And let me say something else to the men watching this, because I know some of you clicked just to roll your eyes. I see you. I am still talking to you. There is nothing soft about what I am saying tonight. There is nothing weak about loyalty. There is nothing fragile about telling a woman the truth on day 1 instead of day 365. The strongest move a man can make in 2026 is to be early. Early with the truth. Early with the boundary. Early with the, I cannot give you what you are asking for, so I will not waste your time pretending I can. That is not toxic masculinity. That is structural integrity. The men who learn to be early save themselves and the women they almost dragged through years of false hope. The men who stay late, who collect the dinners and the holidays and the family photos and then disappear, are not protecting anything. They are stealing. They are stealing time. They are stealing peace. They are stealing the next 10 years of a woman's romantic life, because once a woman gets played at this scale, the trust that gets damaged does not just affect her relationship with you. It affects her relationship with the next 3 men who walk through her door innocently, paying the price for your tap. So be early. Or be quiet. There is no third option. Now I want to pause this entire monologue for a second and hand the microphone over to the part of the story that almost never gets told. The friend group. The inner circle. The handful of women who saw this collapse coming long before the post hit the timeline. Because every breakup of this magnitude has a quiet group chat behind it, a small huddle of best friends who watched the whole thing fall in slow motion and held their tongues out of love and loyalty. Those women carried this with her in private for months. They watched her dim her own light at brunches when his name came up. They watched her cancel solo plans to wait around for a phone call that came 2 hours late. They watched her shrink her vocabulary, her ambition, her body language, her playlists, her schedule, all to keep the peace inside a relationship that was secretly bleeding out. And when she finally hit post, those women did not feel surprised. They felt relieved. Because they had been carrying her secret on their shoulders, and finally, she put it down. The post was not just a public announcement. It was a private exhale. A whole circle of women breathing out at the exact same time, knowing their friend was free again. That is the part of this story the cameras will never capture, but it is the part that matters most, because every woman watching this video tonight has a version of that group chat, and somebody in that chat is one decision away from her own exit post. Be the friend. Hold the line. Print the receipt when she finally tells you to. So drop a comment. Tell me where you stand. Tell me if you think Megan went too far or not nearly far enough. Tell me if you think Klay deserves the redemption arc the league is already quietly building for him, or if you think this sentence is going to follow him to the rafters. Tell me if you have lived a version of this story in your own life, with your own initials, in your own apartment. Tell me if the cycle in your circle is finally ready to break. Tell me what you would do if it was your sister, your daughter, your best friend at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. crying about a man with a soft public image and a sharp private one. Because this is bigger than two celebrities. This is bigger than the timeline. This is the conversation the culture has been avoiding for 20 years, and Megan Thee Stallion just put it on the front porch with a bow on it. Like the video. Share it with the friend who needs to read this twice. Subscribe so you don't miss the receipt drop when the next chapter hits. And remember, the loudest thing a woman can do in a world built to silence her is tell the truth on her own timeline, in her own words, on her own day, with her own name attached. Megan did that. The rest of us are still catching up. And every day that we keep showing up and protecting women who tell the truth, every day that we keep refusing to flatten their pain into entertainment, every day that we keep treating their voices like documentation instead of decoration, is a day that the next woman in our life is one step closer to being free. We out. Stay loud. Stay precise. Stay unshrinkable. And the next time a man tells you he doesn't know if he can be monogamous, believe him the first time, pack your bags before he finishes the sentence, and let the door hit him on the way out of the life he was never built to deserve. Because the right man, the man who is actually equipped, is not going to need a single rehearsal. He will know. He will say it on day 1. He will say it on day 100. He will say it on day 10,000. He will say it without flinching, without dodging, without hiding behind a publicist. And when you find him, you will know exactly what it sounds like, because it will sound nothing, absolutely nothing, like the sentence Klay Thompson just handed Megan Thee Stallion in front of the entire world. Talk soon.